Thank you for everyone joining us today. Joining us today is Chris Thomas. He is a compliance and immigration attorney, part of Holland and Hart. He's one of the partners out there based in Denver, Colorado. They work with Fortune 10s, they work with small businesses, helping businesses with their employment goals and their talent search goals and its relation to immigration. So we're going to get into that. In addition to Chris's fluency in Spanish, his experience working with the Hispanic community, and so much more. So thank you so much, Chris, for joining us today.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. So, just have a few questions for you. I mean, what initially drew you to this line of immigration law? This isn't just, family visas. This is working in complex environments with businesses and the confliction with immigration. So, how'd you get to this point?
Well, I think I've always had an interest in the Latino community. I spent 7 years of my life in Latin America, ranging from Argentina to Colombia to Mexico City, and along the way have found myself when I first started practicing law, I was in criminal defense, and the judges knew that I spoke Spanish, and so they'd pull me aside and say, "Hey, can you help us translate here?" And somewhere along the line, I thought, why don't I find a way to work with these people more often? So, not really knowing as a young attorney, I ended up going to a large law firm, found out large law firms represent companies, but along the way have worked with numerous companies across the country to try to tap into the Latino community, maybe in large part because they find that there's such good work ethic in that community that has been something that companies crave in the United States for the whole 27 years I've been doing this.
Did the work influence your interest in becoming fluent in Spanish, or was it something of the other way around?
It was the other way around. Yeah, I was already speaking Spanish and just love people from Latin America and wanted to find a way to help support their causes if I could.
Cool. What were you doing in Latin America? Were you just there for work, personal reasons?
A little bit of everything. My parents, when I was young, were professors. They took our family to Colombia and Argentina. And then I served a couple church missions, one in Argentina and another one for our church in Mexico City more recently.
Got it. So, I mean, these days, what types of cases are you involved with the most with businesses who have these kind of immigration slash employment challenges?
So I would cut my practice into two halves. The first half is having the conversations with companies about how do you bring people in legally into the United States? What are our options? And there are a variety of options, right? If we're talking about the Latino community, for example, we're interested in maybe bringing in professionals who have professional backgrounds from Mexico who could come in under the TN visa category. Other companies are interested in agricultural needs, and so they're bringing people in on the H-2A seasonal visa program where they can come in, stay for 9 months, have their housing and food covered, et cetera, and then they go home at the conclusion of that period and come back again the next year. They just do it 9 months per year. Others are interested in the H-2B visa category, which allows people to come in for seasonal or peak load needs. For example, individuals coming to work at ski resorts in Colorado during the winters or whatever the case may be. So that's the first half, the whole strategy half. How do we bring in people legally? We're not finding enough qualified U.S. workers. How do we get foreign labor that we can really rely on to help us get the job done here? The other half is representing companies that are in trouble, right? They've been hit by immigration and customs enforcement. It turns out they were employing undocumented workers, and they're asking me, what can we do? How do we not go to prison? And a lot of that will often involve also looking at the workforce they have and figuring out what could we do to support these people. Some of these people might come, for example, from designated countries like temporary protected status countries. That's Honduras, right? Venezuela, some of the other places out there. Others might be in the process of applying for asylum, and maybe we can help accelerate that application or help them get employment authorization in place so that the company can keep these people who are critical to them and they're about to lose them because of this enforcement action that's going on. And then others find themselves in situations where they don't even realize they have legal status options, right? They might be married to a U.S. citizen with kids, and there really are options to help them
Right.
legalize in the country.
That's fantastic. And how often are you interfacing with the clients, or rather the subjects of your business clients, the employees, if you will? How often is that happening?
All the time. All the time. It's what I do most of the day, all day. So, for example, we just went through an enforcement action in California where several employees were flagged, over 100, who had bad documentation, and the CEO of the company called and said, "Okay, we know the law requires that we terminate our employment with them. We're really bummed about that, but some of these people are life and death critical to us. We've got to find a way to save them." And so we're involved in conversations with those critical employees to find out, okay, what do we do? What could we do to help them correct their legal status and be in good standing in the United States?
I'm
A lot
super
of that.
curious because like immigration is such an emotionally charged topic in terms of areas of law, I think among the most. How does, just the election climate affect these conversations and just the general temperature of your ability to get more clients or just the general nature of those relationships? Are they a little different in the lead up to an election because there's so much ambiguity?
We're seeing such a dramatic difference just in the last couple of months. And I thought, what's going on? And then I realized, all right, the election. And in fact, we have boards of directors at companies and others who are reaching out to us saying, hey, will you come in and talk to us about what to expect if Trump wins versus Harris? What are the differences going to be? And we kind of help them understand what kind of environment you're going to have, how hard it will be to get people into the country legally if Donald Trump wins, as opposed to what's it going to be like if Kamala Harris wins and what we can expect there from a status quo perspective.
And so are the reach outs or conversations just helping businesses with like these scenarios, just preparing for either ors?
Correct. Both scenarios, right? First scenario, how do we bring in people legally? Is that going to change with the change in administrations? And the other is, what should we expect from an enforcement perspective? We don't know that we have any undocumented workers, but we have 10,000 housekeepers, right? So the odds are we probably do have a few who may be undocumented.
Got it. Got it. That's fascinating. I mean, I'm curious with do you find that immigrant employees from Latin American countries they face more unique challenges in terms of the ability to get visas or to stay in the country versus persons of other areas outside of Latin America?
I do not find that. In fact, I had the pleasure of meeting with the consul general and the chief of the non-immigrant visa section in Mexico City just a couple weeks ago. And what I found were two men who are very interested in doing what they can to help business in the United States and recognize that maybe the solution is immigration related with the individuals from Mexico in that example. But we do not run into greater complications. If somebody has the educational background, they're going to qualify just as easily as somebody from Germany or the UK will.
Got it. You mentioned that you work with like massive corporations, the Fortune 10s of the world, but also, growing emerging companies. We fall into that category naturally. What are the common misconceptions, business owners have with regards to hiring from other countries, inside the United States, outside the United States, whether or not it's contractor, W-2, et cetera?
Great question, right? You're loaded. You've hit all the key issues of the day in one question there. To start, I would tell you that one of the misconceptions is that it's impossible, right? People think we can't use immigration legally. There's no way to do that. When really there are often some great options out there where they could ease their work shortage problems by bringing people in legally to the United States. So I'd point to that first. Then you point to things like contractors and so on. That's become a hot area of enforcement where there are situations where companies rely on staffing agency labor, maybe too heavily. And what's happening is in the enforcement actions, the trend right now is to treat employers and their staffing agencies as joint employers, and both get hit if one is not following the rules, whether it's the staffing agency or the employer. So I guess what I would tell you is that's a misconception too. How people are classified, how long can somebody really stay as an independent contractor and not be viewed as an employee, et cetera.
Misclassification sounds like it's such a gray area, especially in this virtual environment. Has that created more complexity or it just generally increased more demand for your services because it seems so gray?
It's so gray and so complicated. You're absolutely right. I'm thinking of a case recently that we went through where what happens is the Department of Homeland Security or Immigration sets up these task forces. They'll say, okay, we're interested in investigating that company. and they target that company for whatever the reason may be. They got a tip or whatever the case may be. And what they'll often do is send wage and hour division from the Department of Labor in there, who goes in and starts interviewing everybody who's not in management, and essentially feel they have free reign to do it, and law says they do. So they start interviewing people and they start asking questions such as the following: How long have you been here? Who do you report to? Who sets your schedule? Whose tools are you using? On and on the questions go, and before you know it, they've established a very clear joint employment type scenario, and then Homeland Security and others get involved for the rest of the enforcement action in those kinds of cases. So really, it's just those litmus test questions, right? Who's controlling the day-to-day efforts of the employee or worker? And when you answer that question, you kind of know who the employer is.
Got it. I mean, in these scenarios, we've seen a lot of companies that work with contractors, subcontractors virtually. Do you find that DHS is increasing on the investigations of even small businesses that are utilizing subcontractors virtually?
Yes, we're seeing a significant uptick in recent months. Which is kind of what surprised me, right? Because I thought the current administration was taking the position that we weren't going to get too caught up in that stuff. Definitely incorrect in terms of what we're seeing. We're seeing a major uptick in I-9 audits, looking at companies' paperwork. Are they relying inappropriately on contract or staffing agency labor, et
Hmm.
cetera? A lot of that going on right now throughout the country.
How much does that vary state to state, or does just the federal law kind of overrule everything that at that in immigration?
It's the federal law. So we've got cases going in California to Michigan to Illinois to you name it. It's all over the country.
Got it. Wild. I mean, so what advice do you have for up and coming attorneys looking to get into this area of like compliance and helping businesses navigate immigration? I think this is going to be a huge space for you guys just because we're just in a more in digital environment, more vendor-based, contractor-based environment. Like what for attorneys that are looking to get into this line of work, like what words do you have for them?
I mean, there are some wonderful resources out there for sure. The American Immigration Lawyers Association is an association that puts on great seminars and conferences that cover many of these issues in the world of immigration. I would tell you, though, the best way to learn this stuff is to learn with somebody who's done it. It's hard to sit down and read a book and figure out what the regulations or statutes are really saying in terms of impact on how a case is processed. So find somebody who understands this area of law and get a mentor who can walk you through the process and help you out. And of course, always happy to help. If somebody has some wild situation, we're always happy to have a conversation and just see if we can support the cause.
That's awesome, Chris. Well, thank you so much. This was eye-opening interview. One of the more eye-opening ones we've had in a while. So thank you for hopping on. And any final words for anyone who's watching today?
I think we've covered it well. You asked all the right questions. You will really appreciate the help.
All right,
Nice talking
Chris.
to you.
Thank you.